پای من نریزه.
Are you Dr. Kermanshah? I told him, yes. So, are you really from Kermanshah? Yes, sir.
هجرت توج صدامو از فراز شاخ آبی ای زلال سبز جاری جای خوب غسل تعمیر بی تو باید مرد و پشمان زیر خاک باغچه پوسی فصلی که من با شما شد فصل سبز خواهش بر فصلی که ما بی تو من شد فصل خاکستری
My name is Heshmat and my family name is Kermanshah. I have been born in Kermanshah on Friday, 17th Farvardin 1305 Iranian calendar, which is equal to 6th of April of 1926. Up to the age of 10 years old, I was living in Kermanshah. Kermanshah was a medium-sized city in Iran, located near the border of Iraq. It was about 180 kilometers from Iraq, which in Iran was considered a shortest distance between the two cities. In the ghetto of Kermanshah, I think at that time there were about 3,000 Jews against the 60,000 total population of Kermanshah. Because it had a cold weather, during the winter, I remember that sometimes from the roof we were going to the lane, to the street. There was so much snow that it was difficult to go from the door. We had to go to the roof, and from the roof to jump down to the street and to go away. It was a very cold city during the winter, and fairly pleasant weather during the summer.
خوم کرماشانی فارسین یزانم خوم کرماشانی فارسین یزانم وزوان کردی قزاد و جانم گل و نو شیبا خانمی شوچرای دیوا خانمی گل و نو شیبا خانمی شوچرای دیوا خانمی کرماشانی گم و ترگیریاما ووزو فخاوت اسیر کریاما گل ولو شيبة خانمني شوش رايديوا خانمني قل ولو شيبة خانمني شوش رايديوا خانمني
Kermanshah was the city of the wrestlers. And there was a joke for Kermanshah. Somebody who came from another city and said, Palawan. Palawan, it means a strong man. Everybody looking back and said, you are calling me? When I was between the 5 years and 10 years old, the situation of the daily life in Kermanshah was miserable. There was the beginning of putting up a small electricity factory in Kermanshah, who was taken up by a local Jewish. But that was a great luxury and belonged to the very rich people. We couldn't have it. The majority of the people couldn't have it. We didn't have any chair at home or any table at home. We were sitting on the ground and eating on the ground and sleeping on the ground on the Persian rocks. The Jews in Kermanshah had relatively a free life because in Hamadan, which was another city and bigger city around between Tehran and Kermanshah, the life of the Jews was very, very difficult. There was a story that when people of Hamadan was coming to Kermanshah, they were telling to the Jews of Kermanshah, you shouldn't wait for Mashiach because your life is in order. My grandfather was living in his shop. One side of the shop was his workshop, doing the smith's work, and the other side was his living home in one big shop in the heart of the Jewish ghetto. He lived exactly where he was working. Yeah, and he was all the time alone. He couldn't get along with my grandma. My grandma was another story. She was practically the head of the community. Mm-hmm. Even though she was not participating in the meeting of the Hebra, which means the Central Committee, but whenever they had any problem for the Jews, the Vaad HaKehillah, it means the Central Committee, were coming to her, and she was going to the influential men inside the city and solving the Jewish community problems. She was an outstanding woman, great woman. Her name was Rachel, but the Muslim people were calling him Laher instead of Rachel. Laher. When I was 8 or 9 and 10 years old, and we were living in Kermanshah, the economy was a controlled economy by the government, and all the businesses was belonging to the government. Mm-hmm. For this reason, there was no financial opportunities in Kermanshah, and my father decided to go to Tehran and establish a new life over there. That was the reason why we left Kermanshah. My father was not in Kermanshah, and we traveled with my grandpa, the grandpa of Bahi also. And the best way was to travel with the post bus. The bus was bringing the inter-cities post, and it took us 3 days to travel from Kermanshah to Tehran, while at the time when we were leaving Iran, during 8 to 12 hours you can travel from Kermanshah to Tehran.
اولین باری که بابا رو دیدم من بچه بودم. از تهران بابا اومده بود کرمانشاه برای دیدن فامیل و یک صفحه بزرگ شعر نوشته بود. اون وقت بابا که جوان بود خیلی شعر می نوشت و شعر می گفت. چندین بار این شعر تو اتاقای ما خوند و دور اتاقا زد و اومد و رفت. من خیلی خسته شدم و عصبانی شدم. شعر بابا رو پاره کردم. بابام بدو اومد دنبال من که با من دعوا کنه. تا این یادمه.
When we arrived to Tehran, it was the beginning of March 1936, about. I went to the Alliance School, the Jewish school, and told them that I would like to participate in the public exam to skip 6th grade and to go directly to 7th grade to the secondary school. They agreed, I participated, and I succeeded. So then my father made for me a great favor. He took me to the American college, and he spoke to a friend of him who was working there. With the help of his friend, they accepted me to enter to the American college and start in the 7th grade. That was a great incident in my life because it changed my life for a long time. The reason was the second language in college was English, and nearly all the colleges in Iran were teaching French. In the 7th grade, one day the president of college called Mr. Jordan, came to our class. He took in his hand a book and he started to read one sentence and asked the children to repeat it. Nearly everybody could repeat it. Then he just make it 2 sentences. Good part of them failed in it. Then he started to read one full paragraph. Nobody could read it back perfectly except me. I got up and I read it back word by word. From that time, I got some name and recognition in the school, and I started my first activities in the school. I was chosen as the debater of the class, because in American college, debating was a very important matter, and every class was sending his best debater. They chose me from my class as the debater of the class, because we have had class 7 class A, B, C, D. There were 4 7 classes. And I went out and debated with the designated debater of each class, and I succeeded. Then when I was in 9th grade, I was really the debater of the school. And this brought for me a great deal of name and fame in the college. At that time, Iran air was filled up with the Nazi propaganda waves of radio all the time. There was an Iranian man, a Zoroastrian called Bahram Shahrukh, who was the speaker of this radio. He had a lot of talent, and he was repeating all the Nazi propaganda over the radio, which was the only radio speaking Farsi, and its waves had covered all the area of Iran. The Iranian government did not have any national radio, and that was the only thing which could be heard. In spite of all these things, this situation, the students in my class and in the school, because mostly they needed me to help them for their exams, and when they had these questions, they were coming to me. When we were in the class, the teachers were sitting down and saying Kermanshachi to teach, so nobody dared to argue with me at all. They forgot that I am Jewish. This was very helpful because I was feeling comfortable in the school. In 1942, I graduated from the American College, participated in the concours, as we said in Farsi, in English, in French. There were 500,000 students who were participating in this test, and out of them, a few 10,000 were accepted, because there was no capacity for the Iranian colleges to accept. And in this exam, I participated and I was accepted because my father, at that time, he was not very healthy during the week. 2-3 days he had fever and he was at home. I have had to manage my father's business as well. In order to do this, I searched among the different universities in order to find a university which does not operate during the morning and working in the afternoon. The only university which was operating in the afternoon was pharmaceutical university. So I participated in that exam and I was accepted and entered it was 1942. Because of the war position, the transportation was very, very difficult at that time. There was not even bus, and nobody had any private car. I had a bicycle. I was driving the bicycle, and my father was sitting on the back of the bicycle. There was a special place where he could sit down one-sidedly. It was very difficult to drive him for about 10 to 12 kilometers in the morning and to bring him back again, which all the time it was a steep road. So after a while, when there was a little bit easiness in the transportation, I was taking my father to the custom house, and from there directly I was going to the university for at least for that 4 years which I was going to the school, to the university of pharmaceutical university. I skipped my lunch. There was no time. The university classes was started at 2 o'clock, and I had to leave custom at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was more than 1 hour, and all of this way was steep, and going there to the university in time. Another big important problem was that in the late afternoon, I had to go and visit our customers, those businessmen and merchants who were giving to us their goods, which was in the custom, to be cleared. So I had to go to them to collect from them the documents showing the goods, specifications, bill of lading, and everything. And next day I had to present this to the customer house together with a special form which we had to fill it. And in the custom house the life was very difficult, because something very drastic happened in this business. The son of Khalekoki, my auntie, who was living with his mother in our home, in our house, was taken as an assistant or as a shagird to the custom, to go with my father and to help him. After 2-3 years, this young man went to all the customers of my father, and he told them that it means my uncle is now old, he is not suitable to do the job, I'm doing all the job for him. Why do you give the job to my uncle? Give it to me, I will do it for you at much lower price and much more quicker, because I know very well how to manage this operation. So all the Jewish customers of my father, they betrayed him, and they started to give the paper this job to this young boy whose name was Mansour. I went there to the custom house to help my father and to fill up the space of Mansour, but I made my decision more stronger that this is not a stable type of the job. So I decided to start my own business. I asked my father that we rent an office in the bazaar, not inside the bazaar, just opposite of the bazaar, and I start my work from there. My father had about 150,000 Tuman capital, 150,000 Tuman at that time was about $20,000. We have had sent my brother Norman Nusrat to United States to New York. He went and purchased from Armour Company, who is making Dial soap today in America. At that time it was the same company. He went there and he purchased $20,000 soaps under the label of fine art. That was a label which was built for the export to Middle East by the Armour Company. Therefore, when I started to do any business, we had no money in hand. In view of the fact that all of the capital of my father was blocked in the soap which Norman had bought, so I started once again from bare hand. We didn't have any capital. I went to some of my friends who were doing business in the bazaar to work with them as commission agent. Commission agent is a man who is contacting some companies abroad, and he is a middleman between the importer of Iranian importer and the factory in another country. So for 1 year I was working as commission agent. During 1 year I made 7,000 Tuman profit, which was equal to $1,000. So after 1 year I had $1,000 capital. I went and saw and made an investigation to find out what is the position in the market, in the bazaar. I saw everybody is importer. I thought to myself that let me go to another type of the job which nobody is doing it, and that was the export. From that point, I started the export business. I remember the first shipment which we sent out and prepared was, do you know how to say lubia in English?
Beans.
Beans, white beans. I sold for the first export business which I succeeded to do was to sell 10 tons of beans. However, the Iranian exporters who were sending out the beans, they were not cleaning it properly. They did not take the colored ones from it. Contrary to the other people, I hired employees, and I had one Jewish boy called Murtaza Muradi. We prepared 10 tons of white beans. We sent it to France.
How did you buy the beans?
Oh, it was only 10,000 Tuman. It was not a big amount. And when the goods arrived over there, the importer was extremely happy that for the first time from Iran, a shipment came in which doesn't have foreign admixture, it doesn't have dust, it doesn't have any unwanted goods. So with the first shipment, we made a little bit of good name. I felt that the market of import is fully saturated, and there are many Jewish and Muslims who are doing this. I decided, as I said, to do something different. So, after this first shipment of beans, which was so successful, I started to export oil seed. I had organized a very nice office, a small office. After making some profit from the export, we leased the room beside to my room. So we had now 2 rooms. I went and purchased chairs and tables for people to work on it. And for 1 month, 1 year or 2, my mother was complaining and saying, Heshmat has changed all the wealth of his father to chairs and tables. I put an ad in New York Times that we are an international exporting company from Iran with good report, and we are shipping to you guys, to everybody, sound and clean goods. After this advertisement, we received plenty of letters from many places in the world, particularly New York, and gradually we became well known. The first year of the active business, this is very important, I made $300,000 2 months, which in Iranian money was about $40,000. And the second year I made $600,000 2 months. And by the third year, I was a real millionaire in 2 months. And I was one of the 3 main exporters of Iranian goods, well known in the whole Europe. The secret of our success was that I was very organized. I had good people, reliable people, who were going and standing over the head of these workers. The workers were putting it in the tray and throwing it up and down in order to get rid of the dust from the poppy seed. And when everybody in Europe saw that there is at least one person from Iran which can send out good quality, clean quality, with less than 5% admixture, gradually made a name in the whole Europe.
من وقتی بابا رو دیدم 16 سالم بود که از کرمانشاه اومدم تهران. خونه بابا مهمون بودیم، هر تابستون می اومدیم گاهی خونه بابا، خونه دکتر. چیزی تو مغزم نرسید، ولی فامیلا خیلی به دکتر گفته بودن برو بابایی حرف بزن. اومد با من حرف زد، خیلی محبت کرد، خیلی هم اون دوره خوشگل و جوان برازنده خوبی بود. ما یواش یواش با هم آشنا شدیم. بعد از یه مدتی که آشنا بودیم من رفتم دوباره کرمانشاه، چون که اونجا زندگی میکردم، اونجا مدرسه میرفتم. بعد خانواده بابا و به بابا خیلی اصرار که بیا بابهی نامزد بشه و بابا پدر مادر دکتر اون وقت نمیخواست با من ازدواج کنه. خیلی پدر مادرش بهش اصرار کردن که بیا با هم نامزد بشیم. بعد از چند وقت دکتر و پدر مادرش از تهران اومدن کرمانشاه. عید نوروز بود که با هم نامزد شدیم. اون وقتم که من هیچی سرم نمیشد 16 سال و نیمم بود. نسبت به دوره حالا خیلی بچه بودم. بالاخره برای من کادو آوردن، ما با هم نامزد شدیم. یه 10 روز 15 روز بابا با خانوادش کرمانشاه بود، برگشتن تهران. یه مدتی بعد از چند وقت که تهران بود گاهی بابا می اومد کرمانشاه با از این قارقارک ها هواپیماهایی که اصلا اطمینان نداشت ما رو ببینه. چند دفعه اومد و رفت. تقریبا 1 سال و نیمم نامزد بودیم که ما اومدیم تهران با بابا ازدواج کردیم. دیگه این چیزا هم حالمون نبود، باید خیلی حرف بزنین و با هم آشنا بشین و با هم معاشرت کنین و با هم پروپوز کنین، اینها در کار نبود. بالاخره ما ازدواج کردیم.
Two of my competitors who were exporters and well-known invited me to a lunch. During the luncheon meeting, one of them proposed that it's very good for us to enter into the installing the cotton gin factory. He said, we guys better enter into the factory, establishing of factories. And the easiest factory was cotton gin, which means the staple of cotton are attached very closely to a cotton seed inside it. This machine, this factory, was separating the staples of cotton from the seed of the cotton. We purchased a small factory in Tehran for this business, but it was not very helpful. It was very old. But with the help of this Larizadeh, who was from Shiraz, we searched and we found that in Shiraz there is no factory. So we decided to establish a factory in Shiraz in cooperation with the friends and families of this Larizadeh. We paid 610,000 Tuman, which was about $80,000, no more than about $90,000, and we became partners with few people, all of them Muslims, in Shiraz, a city in the south of Iran. After having the idea of establishing a factory, because the cotton in Tehran and in the north of Iran was already fully in hand of few people who knew the business. But Shiraz, which was at the south, there was no cotton gin factory there. We decided to go there, and with the help of these friends of Shiraz, to build up this factory. For this purpose, I got the agency of one of the big companies in US who is manufacturing the factory cotton gin factory called Lemus. I got their agency and purchased from them a cotton gin factory. We established it in Shiraz on a piece of land of 10,000 meters, and in that way we became to be a factory owner. After a while, we decided with the people, with our partners, to add to this cotton gin a vegetable oil factory as well, in order to, instead of exporting the cotton seed, to produce from it vegetable oil and sell it in the market. I was given the mission in order to purchase the equipment and to prepare the factory. After the factory was ready and the oil was extracted and they sold the oil, I was supposed to go with the Minister of Industry and Commerce to Shiraz for inauguration of the factory. I felt that the type of their talking to me is a little bit changed. But still I went to Shiraz. I had a young man, as I told you, his name was Mansour. Mansour was forced to convert to Islam at that time. And when we were going to the factory and we arrived at the door, we saw the circumstances is different and there was a danger that they might stab me. So I returned from Shiraz and had a heart attack and brain attack because I had worked so hard in order to put up this factory, and at the last time when I was supposed to be there to inaugurate it, they wanted to kill me instead of entering me to the factory with respect and gratitude. Okay, I didn't go into the factory. I came back to Tehran. I had that a stroke at that time, at the age of 33. But when I get better from the stroke, I decided that I will take back my factory from them. Mr. Philip, I fought with them for 3 years. Very hard. I didn't know at that time that they have had the intention to kill me in Shiraz, and they could do it because it was very easy to kill a Jewish man. I took with me my lawyer. His name was Makbul. With his help, and because they couldn't run the factory well, they agreed to sell the factory to me. One thing else happened, that at that time I was very seriously ill. I had caught a type of disease which was very unusual, not unusual, was very common in the country, which was called a hydatid cyst. Hydatid cyst was coming from dog. We had a dog in our house who was going and drinking water from the pond, and I was swimming in that pond. So sometime I have had some part of the water drunk from the pool. Hydatid cyst is a small balls of germs which were coming from the dog, and it was extremely dangerous. For 5 years about, I had this disease, and during this period I couldn't eat much. My weight has come down to about 50 kilograms from 75 kilograms, and all at the end of the day, all what I was eating, I had to throw it back. It was a very, very terrible situation. They take me to a hospital in Iran, which was really very poor type of Catholic hospital. But I was determined to go to outside, to England, for treatment. I went to there, my brother Iraj was there, and they took me to a hospital, to a nursing home. One Iranian friend, he came to me one day when I was in the nursing home. He told me there is a doctor here in the London clinic where I have to be attending, which is excellent. His name is Mangold. Do not accept the operation to be made by anyone except Mangold. And Mangold now is vacation. He will come after 10 days. I do not know how we were convinced that he is correct. So we decided to wait for him to come. I was attended to the one of the best hospital in London. In London there is a street called Harley Street. The best doctors in England, they are allowed after examinations and passing regulations and have an office in this street, Harley Street. At the end of the Harley Street is a hospital called London Hospital. So Iraj, my brother, was there, and he had prepared the ground for us in order to go to the London hospital, and that Iranian man also came to my help. When we arrived at the hospital, we said we want to be operated by Mangold. Mangold was a very, very great specialist and surgeon. After taking the pictures, they saw all my gallbladder is full of stone, and the cyst, you know what is the cyst?
Yeah.
A ball of germ. There are in my body. They didn't know exactly what's going on until they opened my stomach. They found that the gallbladder is full of stones, hopeless, and on my liver there are 3 big balls of cyst, full of germ, microbe.
Mm-hmm.
The operation took 9 hours.
Oof.
And the next morning when I came out of the anesthesia, the doctor came on my head. He told me, you have only 5% chance of living. I told him, why? He said, because all the blood which we are injecting in you, transferring to you,
Mm-hmm.
is disappearing. We do not know what happens to it. And therefore we have to tell you that you have only 5% chance of living and going out of this hospital. I told him, doctor, I have 105% chance of living. He told me, how do you say this? I told him, because I want to be alive. I have children. And I must be alive. I asked them and tell them, what can I do to save myself? They said that you have to move your hands and your legs continuously.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, Mr. Philip, for 48 hours I was moving my hands and my legs.
Oh.
It was the most challenging fight for my life. And thanks God, I remained alive.
در اون موقع من تنها بی زبون تمام وقت با بابا بودم. بعد وقتی میخواست عمل کنن شبش اومد به ما گفتش که این عمل شوهرت 6 ساعت طول میکشه. ما مجبور بودیم قبول کردیم. فرداش که بابا رو بردن زیر عمل 6 ساعت کشید به 9 ساعت. مرتب نرس میومد به ما خبر میداد که خونریزی داره، بهتره، سنگ داره. بالاخره یک روز خیلی سخت که نه فامیل پیشم بود نه بچه هم بودن، خیلی به من سخت گذشت. بعدا خدا رو شکر بابا یواش یواش هوش اومد و حالش رو به خوبی شد. بعد از 10 روز که تونست بشینه و حالش بهتر شد، داشتن به بابا غذا میذاشتن دهنش، خودش نمیتونست بخوره. تا غذا رو گذاشتیم دهن بابا خونریزی کرد. 2 تا 3 تا از پرده شکمش باز شد. بعد بابا رو بردن که پرده های شکم بابا رو ببندن. در اون موقع از بدشانسی برقای کلینیکم به اون بزرگی خاموش شد. حالا به چه وسیله دکترها و نرسا من که نفهمیدم. من فقط خودمو میزدم و میکشتم و گریه میکردم و خیلی ناراحتی میکردن. نمیدونم چه وسیله درست شد که برق اومد یا برق از اتاقای دیگه آوردن به جای دیگه بس کردن. بابا رو شکمش بستن، پرده رو بستن که تا حالا یه پرده شکمش باز موند و اگر شکم بابا رو نگاه کنین یه گلوله بزرگ رو پوست شکمش هست، چون که یه پرده باز شده بود از شکمش.
یه عضله کوچیکی گم شد.
یه عضله گم شد، تاریک بود، نمیدیدن. بالاخره خیلی روزگارهای سختی داشتیم. اونم گذروندیم و بابا خیلی کمخونی پیدا کرد، چون که هرچی خون بدنش بود در اثر این عملا از بین رفت. بعد 45 روز ما تو اون بیمارستان، یعنی 6 هفته بودیم. اتاقی که بابا میخوابید یه تخته بود، درش باز میشد یه اتاق خیلی کوچیکم ادامه اون اتاق بود که یه تخت کوچیک به من دادن. یه ایرونی که ما میشناختیم و پسرش با ما دوست بود تو اون بیمارستان خوابیده بود. بعد از 45 روز من از بابا اجازه گفتم بابا من برم، یادم نیست اسمش کی بود اون آقای که اسکر بود، برم یه سری به اسکر بزنم. بابا گفت برو. من رفتم، نمیدونم نیم ساعت یه ساعت چقدر پیش اون مریض موندم و برگشتم دیدم بابا شروع کرده به گریه که چرا از پیش ما رفتی، از پیش من رفتی. بالاخره گذروندیم به خیلی سخت، ولی خدا رو شکر حالش خوب شد. یکی از اونایی که توی شیراز کارخونه داشتیم یه اتاق برای ما پیدا کرد به اسم منصور بنایان. بالاخره ما رفتیم یه آپارتمان گرفتیم. یادم نیست یه مدت زیادی هم تو اون آپارتمان من مثل نرس نبردیم تو خونه، ولی مثل یه نرس خیلی جوان بودم، انرژی داشتم، بابا رو نگهداری کردم و جای زخمش پانسیون میزدیم. تازه اون وقت آنتیبیوتیک در اومده بود، یه چسبای مثل آنتیبیوتیک که توش بود به ما میدادن. هر روز جای زخم بابا رو تمیز میکردم، آنتیبیوتیک روش میزدم تا گذشت. یه مدتی گذشت که دکتر به بابا اجازه داد، گفت میتونین برین تو پارک راه برین. بابام یه کت شلوار پوشید. وقتی کت شلوار رو پوشید از بس لاغر شده بود که اون کته رو بذاری روی چوب لباس که آویزون میشه، اینجور کته آویزون شده بود توی آستینش، انقدر لاغر شده. هوشنگم خیلی جوان بود، خیلی ما رو دوست داشت. چند وقت یه دفعه از آلمان می اومد ما رو ویزیت میکرد. هوشنگم با ما بود، چند تا از دوستای ایرجم با ما بودن، میرفتیم پارک پیاده روی میکردیم. بالاخره خدا رو شکر گذشت و بابا حالش خوب شد و ما به تهران برگشتیم. رسیدیم تهران، اون وقت همه فامیلا اومدن فرودگاه، همه خوشحال، همه دسته گل آوردن برای دیدن بابا و ما رفتیم خونه. برای اون مدتی که من نبودم ویدا و زیبا خونه بغل ما مامان بابای دکتر می نشستن، خونه داشتن، پیش اونا بودن. مامان خودم هم خیلی کمک میکرد چون که در اون موقع 2 بچه کوچیک زیبا و ویدا رو داشتم، شهرا و شهرام داشتم. بالاخره همه کمک کردن و بچه ها رو نگهداری کردن تا ما برگشتیم ایران. وقتی اومدیم ایران یه مدتی ویدا خیلی ناراحت بود، زیبا نه اونطوری ناراحت نبود. بالاخره اون زمان گذشت.
ولی ویدا چی شد؟
هیچی دیگه، یواش یواش ما آوردیمش خونه خودمون و با ما بود و با من و بابا بودیم، فامیلی بودیم، اما سن بدی بود. حالا که روانشناسا حرف میزنن میگن نباید مادر بچه 3 سالشه بذاره و بره.
مگه چند وقت رفتی؟
تقریبا از بیمارستان تا بابا حالش خوب شد و اومدیم ایران 4 ماه طول کشید تا دکتر اجازه داد ما اومدیم ایران که جای زخمش خوب شد و حالش خوب و اینا. اومدیم ایران، بعداً بابا الحمدلله خوب شد، یه زندگی خیلی خوب و راحتی از اول شروع کرد.
As I told you before, 26 factories of vegetable oil were established in Iran, and after a few years, about 20 of them, they failed to exist. We remained only 6 factories viable. One was a government one and 5 others were private. We were still the smallest, but because we had diversification in our business, apart from having the factory, I was one of the most prominent exporter of the country. We were making some money in the export and putting that money against the loss in the vegetable oil factory. And it is a good experience that my children and grandchildren should know. If they enter into the business, they have to be diversified. That if one side of the factory of the business is not making profit and is making loss, the other side to make profit and to keep it alive. Because of continuous loss, we were on the way to be completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I decided that we have to organize this industry and to build up a syndicate. I organized it with all the competitors were, and we registered it as a syndicate of the vegetable oil factories. I came up with a very genius idea. I took all my competitors together, and we were very close with the ministers. Went there and told them, we are ready to take the responsibility to sell the oil in all the country, from the north up to the south, which was 2,600 kilometers, at the same price. The government accepted, and he was excited for this idea. We told the government, okay, if you want us to give a fixed price to the consumer in the whole country, we are ready to do it, provided that we can get the crude vegetable oil at a low price. So at the end of the day, government came and said, we are ready to give you the crude vegetable oil. You know, one of the problems of the Jews in Iran was that the Muslims were considering them as najas. Najas means dirty. And nobody was ready to touch the body of any Jewish person, because the mullahs has made enter to the mind of these people that these people are dirty people.
Mm.
Naturally, it is very easy for our competitors to call our brand, which is called Nargis Shiraz. Nargis is the same Nargis. That's a flower. Our competitors every day were going to the mullahs, paying them some money. In the mosque, they were making negative propaganda against our product. The name was Nargis of Shiraz. They make it Najas of Shiraz. It means the dirty product of Shiraz.
Oh.
And they were trying to convince the population that this is a product which is made by the Jews. They send the money to Israel in order to kill their brothers, and these goods are najas, dirty, and they were trying to put harem. How do you say harem in English?
A ban?
A ban on the purchase of all products. All my brothers were puzzled what to do. One day I came and I called all my distributors who were going with the trucks and told them we have got the very reliable information that the two main competitors, they have become Baha'i. There are no more Muslims, and they are sending their money to Israel, which is the center of Baha'ism of the world. In this way, we nearly paralyzed the competitors until they came and said, we say nothing, you say nothing. So we got rid of this very big danger.
بابا 37 سالش بود. در اون وقت مدیر نرگس شیراز بود. در شیراز مرتب هر گرفتاری، هر اشکالی، هر جنگ و دعوایی میشد، بابا بایستی میرفت شیراز. 1 ماه میمون، 2 ماه میمون. من 2 ماه با بچه ها بودم. خیلی روزگار سختی داشتیم تا وقتی بابا میومد. بعد کیسه سخت.
چرا روزگار سختی بود؟
چون که بابا تهرون با ما نبود، بچه هم بابا رو میخواستن. شهرام بچه بود، نمیتونست خوب حرف بزنه. مرتب میگفت بابا و به کلیت ماشین میگفت قندول. 1 قندول بیاریم، ماشین بشینیم بریم پیش بابا.
At the end of the business, we had 1 million pounds per day production capacity. But of course, we could not sell it, and we did not operated it. At first we were 4 ton capacity, then we went to 8 ton capacity, then to 25% ton capacity, and then a miracle. What was the miracle? One day I was sitting in my office. They told me that the Minister of Commerce and Industry would like to talk to you on the phone. He told me, with the great deal of money which was coming from the petroleum to the country, the consumption in the country has gone up. For example, if the total consumption of oil per day in the country was 5 to 10,000 tons per day, it came to more than 1,000 tons per day. Therefore, they needed the capacity for production. My main competitors, they had their factories in Tehran, which is capital. The air was very polluted in Tehran. They did not dare to increase any industry in Tehran, in the capital. We were fortunate that we were in a province, in the south of Iran, not in Tehran. The minister told me, I know all the owners of these factories. They do not understand and do not take the interest of the country in their mind. You are a doctor. I have investigated about you. You are a fair and honest man. So you have to go and increase your capacity, which is now 100 tons per day, to 500 tons. For every 1 ton capacity per day, we needed 2 million tuman investment for 500 tons. It means billion tuman. Nobody had in Iran at that time billion tuman. I told them, the Honorable Minister, I tell you from now, I don't have this money. I cannot do this. He said, okay, you go. I went to my office. We had an employee, a lady, who was the family of the minister. In order to import the spare parts, all the time we had to get the permit from the government to import the spare parts. We were sending a letter to the government. In 2 days, 3 days, they were giving us the license. We had the need for some spare parts. We wrote letters to the government. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 1 week. No answer. This lady came to me, my employee, and she said, do you know why they don't answer and do not accept your request? I said, no. She said, the minister is very angry with you, and he has given the instruction to my sister-in-law, something like that, who was the head of vegetable oil industry in the ministry. That means that they stopped giving us the permit to import the spare part. And that was the meaning, complete destroyer of the factory. Because with the factory, if one machine will not have the spare parts, something happens to it, something will be going broke, the whole factory will be closed. I told him what to do. He said, the minister is waiting for you, go and see him tomorrow. I went there. He was just smiling. He said, you did not accept my order and proposal, so you have to close all your factories in a few days. I told him, sir, this requires too much money. I don't have the money. Where to bring this money? He told me I would recommend to the investment banks to give you the money. With this money, we started to purchase equipment and factories and so forth. And at the end of the day, while our main competitors had only a capacity of 300 tons per day, and the second one had 250 tons product per day, we got the capacity of 500 tons per day production and 500 tons reserve per day. This was a business of really several billion tuman Iranian currency, and even in the same size of the biggest American factories. For example, Procter & Gamble have had tens of these factories which I have had. But the government, the country also was 10 times bigger, more than 10 times bigger than Iran. So to be quite honest, suddenly we found ourselves to becoming Procter & Gamble of Iran. To summarize the whole matter, just before leaving Iran, we were number one manufacturer of food industry in the whole country. At the end of the day, we became very wealthy. We reached the 1 billion 2 month wealth.
How much was that in American?
Was about $150 million. Simultaneously with the hard work which I have had in the vegetable oil industry and export and all other things, I was very busy with the community activities. I was truly and honestly the backbone of all the structure of the social activities in our community. Our community was the most disorganized community.
The Persian Jewish community?
Persian Jewish community in Tehran. At the beginning, it was a time that we had about 4,000 poor families out of 9,000 about families in Tehran. And these 4,000 poor family, mostly they were beggars, so poor that they didn't have anything to eat, they had anything to feed. And the economy in the country was very primitive, very unorganized, and it was not easy to create wealth. The majority of these people who were very poor, they found an opportunity of rising and establishing in Israel. They went to Israel. The Jewish position in whole world, and particularly in Europe and Iran, were at the lowest level of the history. A Jewish man did not have any value. The Jewish life was in the pate of everybody. Every person in Iran thought that he has the right to kill a Jew, and there was no fear of any revenge. Nobody was asking why you killed a Jewish man, and no government was persecute anybody for this killing. Their life, their houses, their children, their properties, all of them, they were in the danger. The Muslim people, they had divided all the Jewish houses to rob them and to loot them and to kill the inhabitants of these houses as soon as the German army arrives to Iran. Under such a very unacceptable way of life, I stood up to defend my community. We were 4 students from American Albert College. We merged together and created an organization called باشگاه برادران. It meant the Brothers Club. After a few years, they made a voting for election, and I was elected as the top person. I remember with 26 votes out of 30 votes, which was put in a ballot. From that day, I became the president of باشگاه برادران. For a period of about 15 years, I was doing my duties and succeeded to organize several hundreds of Jewish students and young people to be collected in this organization. I put my first name as Chaim instead of Hishmatullah. My Hebrew name, I gave myself Chaim. There my first greatest remarkable success was organizing a speech. They had a big chapel, which was Bet Knesset and also the place of gathering. Sometimes up to 500, 600 young people were coming to the meeting at the Thursday evening. At that time, because it was a time of war, there was no cinema, there was no security for young men, there was no entertainment. This became the entertainment of the community, and from there, I found my talent for speech, very, very fiery, strong speeches.
و این جای افتخاره که بیشتر از 20% افراد واجد شرایط انتخاب کردن در جامعه ما بدون هیچ زوری، بدون هیچ گونه امتیاز دولتی به پای صندوق آرا آمدن.
Inspiring the spirit of the people not to lose their heart, to defend themselves, not to be worried of anybody, to fight back. And I even took the advantage of some of the Israeli shlichim in order to organize Haganah in Tehran. This was a very confidential organization, and I don't want to speak about it, but it was there. And me myself started developing my own body, exercising, and gradually I was becoming one of the strongest young men among our Jewish people. Because my father had a certain type of illness, every week, about 4 to 5 days, he had fever and he couldn't go to work. I was going to his work, doing his job in the custom clearing of in the morning, and from there I was going to this university, and from there coming back to باشگاه برادران, to our community organization and managing it. I had a very full program of living for myself. I was most probably the well-known special Jewish young leader, which was having a good image among the community. Interesting enough that with all these activities, I was the best student in the university and finished my studies with a first-class scientific medal, which was decorated by King, and he put it here on my chest during the yearly gathering of the whole university students, and the King was coming this. Muhammad Reza Shah was there, and he gave me the medal. Immediately after that, I went to the army, because for the graduates of university, there was no way to get rid of the army service. But I thought that if I will go forward and introduce myself and register myself by myself, I will have a better chance to choose a good position, a good place, which is easier for the Jewish army service in Tehran. And there, fortunately, I was also very successful. I was given also a medal in the army, which was very unusual, but somehow I managed it. In any case, 1942-43, I have had organized the first Jewish youth organization under the name of Bnei Zion. Bnei Zion in Hebrew, Bashgah Baradaran, it means brothers in Farsi. And when I was giving a speech, hundreds of youngs were sitting down and clapping and becoming extremely excited. This was how we started the community activity. At that time, the main backbone of the community contribution for the charity was in the hand of American Joint Distribution Committee, called Joint, who was in Iran and helping the needies in this country and in many countries also. I came up with the idea, which was very brave and very difficult to implement. I told to Joint, please do not pay any money to our community. This I said because I know that many times they told us, the Iranian community, the wealth which you have in your country and the businesses which you are managing is quite sufficient for you to be able to support your needy people in the community. With this support of Joint, we told them not to pay a penny, and they were more happy to do it. So we said to the whole people, don't pay any money to any organization. Next day, all these organizations, they attacked us, and they came in and they said, give us our money. I told them, we shall pay you everything, don't worry, but we have a committee which has to verify your needs and requirements, and the other committee which will decide how much to pay to you.
Mhm.
In this way, I got about 1 month's respite. During this 1 month, I organized the department of preparation and getting contribution from the people, and got one seed money of 50,000, which was a very small amount, and managed it somehow until I employed 8 people who were for the first time in the community. We established one fact which was not acceptable to anyone. Nobody was ready to become a member of an employee who gets the salary from community. This was absurd. That was nothing interesting. And nobody was eager to pay freely any contribution. We take these 2 factors in hand. We told them to people, don't pay to anyone. They were happy. They said, okay, we'll not pay. We said to the different organization, come and get your money from Sandor Melli. They said, okay. So with a small money, we managed for a few weeks, 2 weeks, the position. We gave the money to the institution who were active, and we prevented the people from giving to different people. Then we organized our men who were going to everybody and said to everybody, instead of paying to many people, you pay 100 2 months, 200 2 months to Sandor Melli. So after 1 month, gradually, we established a position that we were the only institution who was able to collect money, and we were the only institution who can feed all the different organizations. Each one of them 20,000, 30,000. One organization was the central hospital, which we had in the ghetto, and that was the most difficult part of it. In this way, I established Sandor Melli. It was 1966, and even up to today, that Sandor Melli is existing and in work in Tehran, in Iran.
Very good.
In the worst times of our industry, my father became seriously ill. We took him to the doctor, and doctor told us that he has got advanced type of the cancer in his intestines. I decided to send him immediately to England in order to be operated.
Mm-hmm.
We sent our father over there, Dr. Mangold, Mr. Mangold, who was the greatest surgeon of England, made operation on him, but unfortunately after the operation he got jaundice, all over his body became yellow,
Mm-hmm.
and he passed away in London. So that was a very big blow with it. We sent Norman there in England in order to take his body to Israel, although his wife Lily was very much against it, but anyhow, he went there, and my father was buried in Israel. Something happened here which was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Many years before that, the father of Bahi, who was my uncle, he wanted to operate on his appendix. Appendix is the smallest type of the internal operation. It's very easy.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Israel for operation, but that was during 1955 and 1956. The war broke between Israel and the Arab countries around.
Mm-hmm.
The situation in the hospital changed. All the attention and possibilities went for the treatment of the wounded soldiers who were coming to the hospital. And he passed away for a very, very minor type of operation. The death of Bahi's father was a hard blow in my life, because he left his young wife, who was only 39, and 5 children,
Mm-hmm.
who the biggest of them was Faridun, and at that time he was under serious crisis of losing his father. Although monetarily they were in good condition, but the wealth of them was scattered in many places. I went to Kermanshah with Bahi for this purpose, and very fortunately, the governor of Kermanshah was a great friend of mine. It was a great friend of my great friend. His name was Fazaili. He was a Muslim and a very nice person.
Mm.
I went there to Kermanshah with Bahi for a short period, and with his influence, I could arrange the matters of heredity and the government interventions very successfully, and establish this position that his family will immigrate from Kermanshah to Tehran. For a period of 20 years, Bahi and me, with 2 of our children, we were living in the house of my father. Under the pressure of Bahi, I purchased a good piece of land in a very, very progressive area of the city, the new part of the city. We built a house which was fabulous. There was a place in the in a center which was showing the progress of Iran. Incidentally, we went there one day and saw that there were the pictures of 3 houses of Iran as the best sample and example of the modern houses in Iran. One was belonging to the prince to the crown, Wali Ahd, the father of this Shah, son of Reza Shah. One was belonging to the head of the intelligence of Iran, which was a general very influential. And the third one was the house of Bahi.
ما 20 سال با خانواده مادرشوهر و پدرشوهر و خواهر که هفته 3-4 روز اونجا بود و فامیلای شوهرمون، فامیلای که از ایران برادرام می اومدن و مادرم و اینا توی یه خونه با اون خانواده زندگی میکردیم که تعریفی نداشت که چیزی دربارش بگم. الان خوبه که هر کسی آزادی خودش داره تو خونه شخصی خودش بده. بعد از 20 سال تصمیم گرفتیم با بابا که بریم بالای شهر که بهترین محل شهر تهران بود، به اسم عباس آباد، یه خونه خیلی خیلی بزرگ، خیلی خیلی قشنگ. یه نفر مهندس به اسم مهندس مراد این خونه رو برای ما ساخت. این خونه 2 طبقه بود. طبقه اولش یه طبقه هم زیر زمین داشت. طبقه اولش یه سالن خیلی بزرگ داشت که تلویزیون گذاشته بودیم. یه سالن بزرگتر داشت که پیانو گذاشته بودیم، زیبا و ویدا و شهلا می زدن. 2 تا سالن خیلی خیلی بزرگتر داشت. سالن مهمون بود و سالن ناهارخوری. درای خیلی خیلی بزرگ داشت. وقتی این درا رو باز می کردیم توی حال شاید 300 تا مهمون که دعوت می کردیم به راحتی اونجا پذیرایی می شد. شام می دادیم. اون وقت کیترینگ هم نبود، ولی اون وقت رستوران های خوب بود که غذا می دادیم، رستوران ها می آوردن. چند تا مهمونی بزرگ اونجا گرفتیم. هر کس از اسرائیل می اومد، براش مهمونی بزرگ می دادیم، خواننده می آوردیم. بعدن که شهلا نامزد شد، یه نامزدی خیلی خیلی بزرگ در هتل شراتون گرفتیم. بعد که میخواست عروسی کنه، اون وقت رسم بود که عقد یعنی قدوش کتوبار تو خونه میکردن. برای شهلا یک مهمونی خیلی مجلل و خوب در حدود 200 نفر 250 نفر دعوت داشتن که شهلا را عقد کردن. بعد از مراسم شادی شهلا و اینها، مراسم ازدواج جمشید با جاسمن بود. چون که خونه ما خیلی بزرگ و راحت و مجلل بود، عروسی جمشید و جاسمن هم تو خونه ما گرفتیم و پشت ساختمون ما یه جای خیلی بزرگ بود، یه آشپز خیلی خیلی معروف آوردیم، غذا درست کرد، 200 نفر 300 نفر شام دادن و عروسی جمشید. بعد عروسی مهناز محبوبه شد. من و بابا بهش گفتیم که بیان خونه ما براتون عروسی گرفتیم. اونجا عروسی مهناز تو خونه خودمون خیلی خوب مرتب تمام فامیل آشنا رو دعوت کردیم، عروسی مهناز گرفتیم.
The parties in our house had the fame and the name among the community.
میگفتی بی تو هیچم، با من بمون همیشه، نباشی من میمیرم، گل بی گلدون نمیشه. چه اشتباهی کردم حرفاتو باور کردم، چه اشتباهی کردم حرفاتو باور کردم.
اون وقت که این خونه رو تو عباس آباد ساخته بودیم، بسیار زندگی خوب، بسیار راحت. آشپز از کرمانشاه بابا برامون فرستاده بود، آشپز داشتیم، زندگی خیلی راحت و خوب داشتیم. 5 تا اتاق خواب بالا ساخته بودیم، شهلا جدا، شهرام جدا، زیبا جدا، ویدا جدا و برای خودمون خیلی راحت و خوب بودیم. ولی بعد از 1-2 ماه شهرام رفت به آمریکا که خیلی هم بچه بود و اشتباه بزرگی کردیم. بچه بود، انگلیسی بلد نبود. یه دفعه بابا با برادراش تصمیم گرفت شهرام فرستادیم آمریکا. خب اون موقع ما ناراحت بودیم، ولی سال یه بار دو بار شهرام می اومد، من و بابا می رفتیم سیراکیوس بود، به سر می زدیم. اونم خیلی دوره خوبی بود. جهلام که ازدواج کرده بود رفته بود خونه خودش، یک آپارتمان خیلی خوب مجلل جوزف براش گرفته بود و داشت یه خونه خیلی 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 خوب، خیلی عالی. شهلا جوزف براش ساخته بود، میساخت. خیلی عالی و خوب بود. زیبا و ویدان که کلاس 11 شونه تموم کردن، چند سال بابا میفرستادشون تو کمپ آمریکا، تابستونا کمپ بودن، زبون خوب یاد گرفتن، ولی بعداً تصمیم گرفتیم زیبا و ویداره بفرستیم سوئیس. زیبا و ویدا هر دو اومدن سوئیس، کلاس 12 اونجا خوندن. در اونجا بابا یه آپارتمان خیلی شیک و خوب خریده بود. گفتیم هر وقت بچه ها تعطیل میشن زیبا و ویدا بیان تو آپارتمان که تا تهرون نیان، ما هم اونجا باشیم. اونم دوران خوبی بود، ولی مدتی نکشید که انقلاب شروع شد.
The good thing about the revolution in Iran was it didn't happen overnight. It was not like the revolution of Gaddafi, for example, in Libya, or many other countries in Middle East. It was really an evolution, which gradually took position and finally captured the whole country.
Fundamentalism took hold with a fury and a force that helped ignite the still impoverished masses in Iran, who felt they had little reason to be grateful to the Shah. The fabulous profits from oil had not filtered down to them. Autumn 1978. Anti-Shah demonstrations had grown to such proportions that the Shah declared martial law in most of Iran's cities. The crowd shouted death to the Shah. Among the despised symbols of their monarch, the marchers raised pictures of the Shah's antagonist, the bearded, fierce-eyed holy man, Ayatollah Khomeini.
I felt it very well because I was the leader of the community, and I had a general impression of the situation from the viewpoint of the situation of the Iranian Jewish community. I was aware of it, and very strange, about a year or 2 years before the revolution, I felt that I have to change the structure of the leadership of the community, and also the structure of my business. At the end, 6 months before the revolution, we resigned, all of us, from the management of the company, gave the management to Jamshid, the father of Robert, late Jamshid, and Mr. Faridun. We made a new board of directors, which was composed of Faridun, Jamshid, and other people of the family who could stay in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to establish the board which could speak with the people at that time. Also, Yusuf, and the father of the husband of Violet, who was the head of distributing the vegetable oil, he stayed over there during the revolution. There were 3 big vegetable oil companies in Iran. The day after the revolution, the people came, the revolutionary people came, and they captured all these factories, number 1 and number 2. Week after, they came also in Shiraz in order to capture our factory.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of the greatest points in our history. Wu and Shah Passan, who were 2 main and big factories, the workers and the management in the factory, they invited the revolutionary people to come and to confiscate it in order to get rid of the leadership, owners, and take the leadership. In our company, it was absolutely different. The revolutionary people came there. The local leadership of our company, they pushed them out. They didn't accept it, and they said, we are happy with Kermanshahchi people who have been doing this and will continue with them. That was probably one of the fewest ones who were saved by the local leadership in favor of the owners.
Mm.
In view of the fact that I had a big name as the Zionist and the leadership of the Jewish community, it was very dangerous for me to stay in Iran. 6 months before the revolution, I came out because it was not safe for me to stay there. And went to Cannes, stayed there, and I was managing our business with remote control from Cannes. Fortunately, the difference of time between Cannes and Tehran was only 2 hours and a half. So if I was getting up a little bit early in the morning, that was just nearly the time that the people, our employees, were coming to the office. From there, very easily and conveniently, I was managing the whole thing, and I knew everything, what happened and what's going on. It was January 1979, which I decided to go back from Cannes to Tehran in order to reorganize the situation and to choose a management which will be suitable for the situation and the structure of the country. We resigned, all of us, from the management. Mr. Faridun and Mr. Jamshid were among the new board of directors, would take up the whole organization in order to manage it. During this January, everybody who saw me, they told me, you shouldn't be here at this time. It is very dangerous for you. But I had a mission to finish. However, one night, about the end of January, beginning of February, there was a phone call from the man who was the head of the intelligence of the community, which I had assigned to this mission. His name is Mr. Bekhrad, and he is still alive. He's about 95, 100, I don't know. He told me, Doctor, it is extremely dangerous for you to stay here, and you have to go right tomorrow.
By January of 1979, it was clear the Shah could no longer reign.
A tearful Shah of Iran left his country today on a vacation from which he may never return. There was a triumphant and tumultuous welcome in Tehran today by more than 1 million Iranians for the Ayatollah Khomeini, returning home from 15 years of exile. He demanded that the government resign at once or face arrest, and that foreigners, especially Americans, get out.
For security reasons, the airport has been sealed off to the general public, and Khomeini's first few moments on Iranian soil were subdued. It was the quiet before the storm.
I told him it's not possible for me to go tomorrow. After all, we came to the conclusion that in 2 days latest I have to leave Iran. During that time, there was no authority in the main airport of Tehran, which was called Mehrabad Airport. Part of it was, interestingly, in the hand of the Israeli intelligence people who had filled up the vacuum over there. It was a cold day of February. I went there and said goodbye to my mother and to my sister and told them that I will make arrangement that they will move and come to Israel. So we left. It was a miracle because after we sat in the airplane, somebody came there and he checked the passport of all the passengers. He landed a few people, but even though that we were sitting in the first row, first class, he had a little bit doubt what to do or what not to do, but suddenly gave me my passport and went and discharged a few other people who stayed in Iran. There is no doubt if I had been landed at that time, I was killed completely and destructive.
اومدیم 2 مرتبه همون تو آپارتمانی که برای وکیشنمون گرفته بودیم و خریده بودیم، تو آپارتمان زندگی کردیم. شهلا و جوبین 8 ماه 9 ماهش بود. با ما اومدن، جوزف کار داشت نیومد، من بودم و شهلا و جوبین و بابا، زیبا و ویدام سوئیس درس میخوندن. هر وقت تعطیل میشدن میومدن پیش ما. گراجویت هم که شدن از کلاس 12، من و بابا رفتیم برای زیبا ویدا با ماشین خودمون یه جایی یادم نیست کجا گراجویت شدن، اونجا لزن. بعد از چند وقت که جوزف هم اومد با شهلا. تو همون آپارتمان بودیم، 3 تا اتاق خواب داشت. بعد فریدون و مهین، مهران و مینو خانم، اونا هم بچه بودن، خیلی بهشون سخت میگذشت، انقلاب شده بود. مهین با مهران و مینو با چه بدبختی از راه زمینی فرار کردن، اومدن تو آپارتمان. بالاخره خیلی سختی بهشون کشید. فریدون موند تهران. حالا مهران و زوبین تقریبا همسن بودن، با هم نمی ساختن، دعواشون می شد. بالاخره یه چند روزی هم مهین میرفت تو آپارتمان نصرت، ولی مرتب پیش ما بود. یه مدت 2 ماه هم مهین با بچه هاش با ما زندگی کرد. مهین برگشت تهران، ما اومدیم، بچه هم درسشون تموم شده بود، آمریکا با زیبا و ویدا و شهلا و جوبی.
One day I came out and went to one of the streets of this Cannes, and I saw there was a street cleaner. Was cleaning the street and singing for himself, and he was so happy. But I was very unhappy because we didn't have any base in our life. Iran had given us a passport, and he didn't want to renew it. That means that in 2 years, 1 year, we didn't have any identity in the world. At that time I understood how important is identity for the human being. Otherwise it's just like a leaf going around everywhere by the wind. In Cannes we stayed for 6 months in the hope that Iran will become back to the kingdom and things will be changed, will be temporary. It didn't happen like that. So one day Ruhi, my third brother, came to Cannes and told me it's the best for me to go to America.
اومدیم رفتیم سیراکیوز تو خونه شهرام. یه مدت کوتاهی اونجا بودیم تو سیراکیوز. بعد بابا تصمیم گرفت من و بابا و زیبا اومدیم لس آنجلس، رفتیم هتل هیلتون، 1 ماه اونجا بودیم. بعدن یه آپارتمان خیلی خوب تو خیابون فوتهیل بابا خونه بود کرایه کردیم که چشم روز بد نبینه. آقا این آپارتمان درش باز بود. اولا مامان و بابای دکتر نبود، مادرش مریض شد، اومد تو آپارتمان ما خوابید. ویولتا شوهرش و دخترش نامزد بود، اومدن تو آپارتمان ما. این در آپارتمان ما بسته نمیشد. هر کس بدبخت شده بود و بی پول شده بود، بیکار شده بود و از ایران در اومده بود، میومدن خونه. فیروز اومد، خانومش اومد، مامانم بود، مامان دکتر بود. هر فامیلی که اینجا میمونید سرش تو خونه ما بود. ما آشپزی میکردیم، غذا میذاشتیم جلوشون. بابام مشورت میکردن که این راهنمایی میکرد، برو این کارو بکن، برو اون کارو بکن.
چرا نمیگفتین نه؟
چون که اون وقت خیلی صمیمیت بود، خیلی فامیلا به هم احترام میذاشتن. جمشید و جاسمنم که اومدن رفتن ولی یه خونه خریدن، اونا هم به ما سر میزدن. سعید چند وقت ما سان فرانسیسکو، اونا می اومدن به ما سر میزدن. خلاصه یه زندگی در هم و بر هم خیلی سختی داشتیم اونجا. بعد بابا تصمیم گرفت خونه بخره، اومدیم همین خونه که الان اینجا نشستیم خریدیم.
Well, after arriving and establishing in this house and purchasing the furniture and all the things, it came the subject of working, having a job.
In
We had already from the days of before the revolution, when we were well established in Iran, Ruhi came to Texas, and he was speaking very highly about Texas. Texas has a city called Houston. Houston was the center of the petroleum business in United States, and it still is. Out of the 26 biggest oil companies, 24 of them had their headquarters in Houston. And at the time was before the revolution, but unrelated to Iranian revolution. It was the center of the energy of the world. For this reason, before the revolution, on the inducement of Mr. Ruhi, we made a lot of investment in Houston. I can say 500,000 square meters of land we purchased in different parts of Houston. What happened in Houston in those days, between 1980 up to 1985, was a very sad story for anyone who had any business in Houston. Houston was supposed, according to the prediction of many economists, to become the largest city in the world. The reason was, number one, Houston was the capital of the oil business in United States, and as I said, out of the 26 big and largest oil companies in US, 24 of them, they had their headquarters in Houston. The oil prices after the revolution in Iran started to jump and to go up from a barrel of $16 and $12, it went up to about $40, for which at that time it was an enormous jump, and it affected on the economy of the many Western countries and created a Great Depression for many places. The real estate of Houston, which was very hot, and it was like Iran, that you were buying some land today at any price, and after 1 month or two you were selling it at double price. And it was the same situation which was in Iran during the Shah. When suddenly the oil crashed, the price of the oil fell from about $40 for a short period of time even to $8. Houston also crashed, and all business in Houston crashed as well. The projection which was given to us and the feasibility study which was delivered to us by economists was the Intercontinental Airport in Houston will have about 20 million passengers per year by 1990. It happened so that during 1984 or 85, instead of going to 20 billion, went down to 8 million. 8 million cars departure from that. And because on this projection, we built a very, very splendid airport parking. We spent, against the feasibility study and planning which we had in hand, instead of $700,000, projection for the expenses, it cost us about $1,300,000, nearly double. But in the same time, with the opening a closed airport, which was Forgotten Airport, in the south of the Houston, which was very pretty, very near to the downtown. The main people who were traveling a lot were businessmen. And these businessmen were going from downtown to this new the reconstructed airport in 10 to 15 minutes. They didn't have to come to the north and to go to the Intercontinental Airport, which was taking them about 1 hour. And particularly one thing which annoyed me, my brother Norman and my brother Ruby. They were the two persons who were very hot about Houston, and they encouraged me in order to establish this airport remote parking. As soon as they felt the situation is Houston is going bad, they became my enemy. He did not help me at all, but each one of them started to file a lawsuit against me. It was a very sad situation, particularly for Bahi.
خیلی بد بود، چون که از روز اول که شهرام رفته بود پارکینگ اداره کنه، یه آپارتمان یه اتاق خوابه گرفته بود شهرام با یکی از کارمندایی که دوست خود شهرام بودن. اون تو پارکینگ کار میکرد، ولی اون از تو آپارتمانه رفت آپارتمان یه اتاق خوابه. من و بابا و شهرام اونجا زندگی میکردیم. از این آپارتمانه که دور برش همه یکی یه اتاق دارن و یه استخر، روبروی ما که آپارتمان رو باز میکردیم یه تگزاس لات دیوونه بود، سگش اندازه خودش بود، او همسایمون بود. شبام تا ساعت 2 و 3 اینایی که تو اون بیلدینگ بودن همه تو استخر بودن، داد میزدن، مشروب میخوردن، هروئین میزدن که برای ما خیلی سخت بود.
The person who helped me the greatest was Sharam. Sharam all the time was with me. He was managing the parking lot, and we decided to find a solution for it. One day I decided to go to our main competitor. Our main competitor was All Right Parking. All Right Parking is very, very famous. They have several hundred parking all over the United States. We asked them, what can we do together in order to, because their airport parking, which our main competitor near us, also was not doing very well. In the meantime, an Irish family who were very big and very wealthy in the oil business, they opened another airport parking on the same Century Boulevard. They were the nearest to the airport. We were the farthest to the airport. We tried to discuss with these two, but we couldn't get through. Finally, I established a good relation with the manager of the All Right in Houston. His name was Mr. Stone. We had 1 or 2 meetings with him. I remember that his lawyer was sitting there also always discouraging him from talking because this was against the trust law.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have any wrong idea. We didn't think and thought about hiking the price or anything. Suddenly, Mr. Stone came up with an idea. He told us, "Are you ready to rent or to lease your parking lot to us?" I was so excited and I was so happy because that was the solution of all our problems. But took control of myself. I told him, "I don't think it's a good idea, but I'm ready to think about it." I didn't show any weakness at all. Then we came back to the very, very poor apartment which we had in a big complex of a small apartments where we were living in. And as soon as we opened the door, Shalom and me, we cried and said, "Becky, everything was okay, is becoming okay, and we shall soon go back to California." We went back to Mr. Stone next day and made an agreement in order to have a contract to lease him the Jitero Airport parking at $20,000 per month. However, we had still about $1 or $2 million loan on it. Gradually, we had taken loan in order to pay the installment of so many other pieces of land which we had in Houston, all of them without any income, but all of them having a certain monthly payment. In any case, after this, we closed the parking. Bahi came back to California, and 3 months later, I came back as well.
چی بگم؟
چی داری بخوابیم؟ چی واقعیت رو بگیم؟
واقعیتش خیلی بد.
چی بد باشه؟
رفتیم هستون که بابا چند تا زمین خریده بود با شرکت برادرها. یه تیکه زمینم خریده بود برای برادران، یعنی جمشید و سعید و هوشنگ نه فریدون و اینها با هم شریک بودن. بابا یه زمینم با پول اونا خودشون خرید که این زمین ترقی کنه. از وقتی ما رفتیم هوستون وضع زمین خراب شد، تا الان که 33 سال میگذره خراب شد. ولی خدا رو شکر، خدا معجز کرد، زمینی که با جمشید و سید و اینا خریده بودیم بابا به قیمت خوب فروخت و پولش برای برادرای من تا آخر فرستاد. اما زمین ها خودمون ترقی نکرد. یه پارکینگ بابا بود که برادرها به کلی ولش کردن، با ما شدن دشمن، کمک که نکردن، هر روزم با تلفن و با نامه و با چیز با ما جنگ و مرافعه میکرد.
چرا؟ من یه سوال دارم. از نظر خودت این جنگا از چی شروع شد؟
از اینجا شروع شد که وضع تگزاس خراب شد، زمین ها ترقی نکرد، وضع پارکینگ خراب شد، پول برای برادران نمیفرستاد، هر جایی که پول میره جنگ و دعوا شروع میشه. تا وقتی پولا رو در می آورد در ایران همه تعظیمش میکردن، همه آقای دکتر میگرفتن. وقتی وضع تگزاس خراب شد همه با دکتر دعوا میکردن که چرا پول نیست، چرا وضع اینجوری شده. همشون اومدن لس آنجلس و اصلا به بابا کمک نکردن. کسی که کمک کرد به بابا شهرام بود که در اون موقع پا به پای بابا، خیلی هم اون وقت جوانتر بود دیگه، 33 سال گذشته، پا به پای بابا میرفت برای زمین، میرفت برای دعوای تو پارکینگ، میرفت با کارمندای پارکینگ دعوا میکرد دیگه. خیلی خیلی به ما سخت میگذشت. منم در سال 2 بار 3 بار میرفتم پیش بابا اینا. تو این خونه که الان هستیم شهلا که ازدواج کرده بود رفته بود، زیبابیدا اینجا بودن و یه کارگر اسپانیشی داشتیم. خیلی به بچه ها میرسید. منم گاهی میرفتم پیش بابا و شهرام که بسیار بسیار هر چی که فکرش بکنی زندگی سختی به ما گذشت که خورد و داغون و پیر شدیم و چشم منم که یکیش از بین رفت از ناراحتی تگزاس.
چرا شما که پول داشتین رفتین تو؟
پول نداشتین دیگه، هرچی پول بود رفته بود.
تو چی؟
تو زمین رفت. در اونجا اینو یادم رفت بگم بابا تو کار طلا خریده بود، 7 میلیون دلار طلا همه از دست رفت. قصه این بود که بابا صبح میرفت سر کار با شهرام، من تنها تو آپارتمان می نشستم، تنها میرفتم تو این فروشگاه را میرفتم، تمام کارم اشک ریختن بود. اونجا وضعمون بد بود. اینجا زیباویدا خب خیلی جوان بودن، تنها بودن دیگه، زندگی بدی داشتیم. ولی خب خدا رو شکر اونجا هم تموم شد و اومدیم اینجا و سنگم بود، سنگ الان آب شده بود. حالا ما چجور موندیم اونم خواست خدا بود، خواست خدا بوده که زنده دیگه. زندگی همینه، انقدر خوبی داره، بدی داره، بالا داره، پایین داره تا تموم بشه.
After we entered California in 1980, I didn't have any business here. We went to Houston off and on, and we left Houston by 1985. From 1985 to 1998, the only business which I had, I was shipping the licorice to one of our old client, and that would happen in this way, that one day we had a dispute with my family people who were managing the ulam in Israel, and we went to the lawyer of this ulam. There was a dispute between my brothers and the children of my auntie regarding this matter of ulam and wedding hall. The lawyer who was handling our business over there in Israel was located in Haifa, and his name was Yaakov Solomon. While we were sitting in their office, suddenly it came to my mind that in the past I was exporting licorice root from Iran to a factory there which was called Fertilizer and Chemicals. So I decided to call them. And I told them that my name is Dr. Kermel Shachi. In the past we have been working with you. They told me, you stay there, we are coming. And I sat down in that office, and after half an hour, Engelberg and somebody else who were in charge of this licorice unit of ICL, they came over there. We started to talk to them, and there I understood that this is a particular unit of ICL, the biggest factory, the biggest company in Israel, and I offered them to export to them the root. Up to that moment, I didn't have any business here in California. My business was Texas, which we spoke about it. For several years, this was my only business. It happened so that after a while, I saw that the purchasing managers were in fertilizer and company and were purchasing root from me. They started to do business with others and to purchase the root from other people also. It was a time which I felt that fertilizer and chemical sometimes might purchase from me and sometimes might not purchase from me. And because that was my only source of income, I saw no other way but to go and purchase this factory. And I will be myself the exporter all the time to it. I consulted with one or two people. They didn't know anything to help me or direct me, but I made up my mind in order to go and try to purchase it. At the beginning they said 25 million. Finally, Mr. Philip, I bought it at 7 million from them. And I was going to live in Israel and to manage the factory myself.
ما چون که در لس آنجلس بودیم و بابا وضع کاریش خوب نبود و نمیخواست بره داونتاون کار بکنه، میگفت من چون که در جوونی همیشه کارخونه داشتم، حالا میخوام یه کارخونه در اسرائیل داشته باشم. درسته؟ بعد تصمیم گرفت خیلی این بر اونور رفت و اومد و اینها، یه اسرائیلی به اسم اینگلبرت پیدا کرد، با اون تصمیم گرفت که این کارخونه رو بخرن. این کارخونه خیلی کارخونه کوچیک و بدون درآمدی بود و هیچ سودی نداشت، ولی بابا به هر زحمت و به هر بالا پایینی بود بالاخره تصمیم گرفت که با چند نفر شریک بشه و این کارخونه رو بخره و خرید. یک دفعه که ما اسرائیل بودیم، من و بابا و کارخونه رو خریده بود، زیبا برای 2 هفته با بابا اومد اسرائیل، وضع اسرائیل دید، وضع کارخونم دید و برگشت. اون وقت با بچه ها نیومد. بعد که بابا دیگه 100% تصمیم گرفت و کارخونه رو خرید با چند نفر شرکا و اینها، ما یه آپارتمان داشتیم در رعنانا. من و بابا تو رعنانا تو اون آپارتمان زندگی میکردیم. بابا که کارخونه رو خرید، هر چی به زیبا گفت زیبا نیا، زیبا داد و فریاد و ناراحتی که بابا من حتما باید بیام اسرائیل. بعد تصمیم گرفت توی آپارتمانی در دوهینی زندگی میکرد زیبا. آپارتمانش همینجوری درش بست، با 2 تا بچه‌هاش فیلیپ و زکی اومد اسرائیل. اون وقتی که زیبا اومد اسرائیل، البته هنوز کارخونه هیچ سودی و هیچ منفعتی نداشت، هیچی نبود. روزا بدون ماشین، با قطار، بعضی راهاش با تاکسی، بابا و زیبا از رعنانا میرفتن تا کارخونه.
Every year during the time of Rosh Hashanah, the ICL group was making a feast, and in general invitation, all the employees and the workers of this factory and many other factories around the area were coming, and in a big hall, sitting all together. Some people were giving some speeches, and in this way the authority in this factory was to be handed over. During this period, Mr. Engelberg was telling me that during the day before Rosh Hashanah, you have to be there. Everybody will give an indication and a report about his unit. Each factory was a unit. Engelberg was the head of this unit. We sat down there, and I told him, Engelberg, go ahead and give a speech about the factory. I found that he is afraid to go up.
Why?
I do not know, because he didn't know anything more than his small job of managing a part of the factory. When we entered during the Rosh Hashanah to the general meeting of the units of ICL, somebody had a microphone in the hand, and he was speaking. He didn't know that I know Hebrew at all, that person. He said, گفت یک جماعت بی اطلاعیه.
من میدونم اینم مختصر.
بله. A group of people who do not know anything about licorice have come here to buy it. If the management will sell it to these ignorant people, we know that they will destroy this factory. Therefore, we destroy them before they come in. And the first day that they will come in, we shall start a strike of the workers. I was sitting there, Ziba was there, and Engelbert was there also. I told Engelbert, go and give an answer. He was hesitating. I went to the podium. When he had in his hand the microphone, I just grasped it from his hand. I didn't ask for it. As soon as I said, Giberutai Berabotai, suddenly the whole meeting, the whole audience were quiet. Because they didn't think that somebody coming from America is speaking Hebrew. I told them, true indeed that you have got a factory here, but you have forgotten one point. The world of the industry is moving forward day after day. And anybody who cannot go along with this speed, he will lose his position. You have a factory which was built 50 years ago. During 50 years, you are managing this factory on the same basis, without any improvement, without any change, and without any innovation. And I'm sure in this way, after a short while, you will face a standstill position. I have come from California, from 10,000 miles away, with Zionism in my heart, and determination is my mind, in order to improve it and to make it better. I brought with me money, I brought with me knowledge and know-how, and the capability of the management. Believe it or not, everybody was impressed. Everything in Hebrew, not in English. And someday after my start of the speech, some people clapped. But when I finished it, it was another story. Many people gathered around me, and the man who has a very high authority over there, and he was a member of the management, because they had a head table for them.
Yes.
He came to me and said, I apologize if this man was not polite, but you impress everybody. We shall be happy to cooperate with you. Here, just for you and for my other children and grandchildren, I have to tell you, there are minutes in the life that one little part of courage can do much more than the greatest politics. There is a story in the history of the Iranian kingdom. There was a very famous king was also very brutal. He was so brutal. His name was Taimur Lang. He was a very brutal person, and he was very hard and serious person. And one day, he was going with his army for hunting. He lost the people, and he took refuge in a cave. He was completely lost and discouraged and despaired. He was looking at the wall, at the stone. He saw an ant, Murche. He started to go up from the wall, which was all sand. Went to near the top, fell down. Again, the ant came back to the point of a start, went up, fell down. Taimur Lang, the king, was interested about this episode, and he started to count how many times he can go. He counted 39 times. The ant tried to go up to this wall, and he fell down. And in the 40th try, he succeeded. He made it the way of his life. And I made it the way of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Never ever discouraged, and never ever to lose the spirit. These are the two important things. فهمیدی خانم؟
بله.
تیمور لنگ چیکار کرد؟
20 دفعه رفت رو کوه.
نه.
دید
مورچه دید 39 دفعه رفت بالا افتاد.
حالا اگه مورچه 20 دفعه 30 دفعه رفت، ما 30 سال رفتیم و اومد.
Let me hear you. Nobody knows.
Alright, here goes a joke. When I was told all my friends I was gonna be comedian / actor, they all laughed. No one's laughing now.
Oh, no. Glory. I've been talked about, yes I have, just as sure as you're born. This is a mean world to try to live in, but you've got to stay here. Oh, yeah.
birthday is today? It's the 6th of May.
My birthday's the 6th day.
Yeah, 13?
19.
Hi, Billy. How are you? Good. Oh, it's Joe. Hey, Joe, say hi to the camera. Hello. Happy birthday, shout out. There you go.